for taking us through the technical aspect. We welcome you all to this working session that is being hosted by the Global Refugee Youth Network, the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative, and Oxford's Refugee-Led Research Hub. Once again, welcome. We're looking forward to having a great session with you. My name is Foni Boni. I will be one of the moderators, and my other co-moderator will be Simon Marot Tulong, who you will shortly interact with as we continue with the session. As we continue with this session, we're quite keen to hear from you, to learn which organization you're part of and where you're based. So if you could also in the chat spend some time, please introduce yourself, tell us where you're based and what organization you work with. We'd be keen to meet you all and to learn more about the different works you're doing. Next slide, please. Before we get to the next slide, sorry, I just wanted to highlight a few technical issues that we need to take into consideration as we go on with the session. We ask all of us to keep our microphones off while others are making this intervention. This meeting will be recorded, as you have heard, and the purpose is to ensure that all the people who are not able to join in today can still make reference to the video and learn from what we have been able to share today. Please note as well that during this discussion, we do have quite a lot of us, and we highly encourage us to use the chat. Raise your questions, share your experiences. We'd be quite keen to continue engaging with you, not only through giving you the opportunities to speak, but then in case the time is running out, you can also use the chat. For this particular session, translation in the plenary is available in Spanish. But we will have a section where we'll go into breakout rooms, and there'll also be there'll be working sessions in French and in Arabic, as well as Spanish. So for the main session, which is the plenary, the translation that is available is Spanish alone. And why are we actually here today? Well, the purpose or the reason why we're here today is, first of all, to really get to understand, to share and discuss our findings from the global civil society self-reliance survey that we have been conducting. We want to really understand refugee self-reliance, and we also want to explore the policies and practices and share different barriers and opportunities, as well as successes that have been achieved. We want to spend some time today to really create recommendations for self-reliance, especially refugee self-reliance, which will then be shared in a roundtable on November 29th at a meeting which is being referred to as the high-level official meeting that will be happening in December. And for our agenda today, it's really been a pleasure to see all of us who are present here to learn and to see your introduction. We will spend some time and get to meet the different people who've been involved in this particular survey. We will then have a quick networking activity, and then we will get into the flesh of the meeting, where we will look at refugee self-reliance and also understand the initial survey of the results that we've been able to collect for the survey. And then we will spend some time in group work, where we will formulate recommendations which will then be highlighted at the high-level official meeting, just as I have mentioned. And then we will spend some time in the plenary discussion to share the top recommendations that have been able to be shared by all of you. So once again, welcome to this session, and I'm going to hand it over to Simon to continue with the next segment. Simon, over to you.
Thank you so much, Foni, for the introduction and for leading us through. So you're most welcome again. I'm called Simon Marot Tulong, and I'm the advocacy and the networking coordinator for the Global Refugees Network. As I will also be co-moderating with Foni today. So I'm going to take us briefly about the Global Compact on Refugees, and then the Global Refugees Forum, the high-level official meeting, which is scheduled to take place in December, and the Refugee Self-Reliance. So as you all know, that the Global Compact on Refugees is an agreement that is among states that include commitments on how to improve refugees response and be more accountable to refugees themselves. So at the Global Refugees Forum in 2019, states, civil society made pledges on how to improve the support that they give to refugees. So the high-level official meeting, which is scheduled to take place in December, is an opportunity to take stock of where we are on with the progress towards those pledges that were made in 2019, and also hold the people who made the pledges accountable so that we know what they have pledged for and what they have fulfilled in their pledges. So as you all know, like on the Global Compact, they had like 4 objectives. And one of the objectives is the enhancing of refugee self-reliance. So the first one is to release pressure on host countries. The second one is to enhance refugee self-reliance. The third is to expand access to third country solutions. And the fourth is to support conditions in countries of origin for returns in safety and dignity. So the refugee self-reliance number 2 is our focus today. So self-reliance is one of the 4 pillars of the GCR. So 97% of refugees are in the countries of first asylum. Like someone is displaced from South Sudan, is staying here in Uganda. That's the first place of asylum. So if states and civil society can support self-reliance, it will be very life-changing for millions of refugees. And if refugees could be self-reliant, they could even be able to contribute to the countries where they are living right now, for instance, Uganda. So the discussion today is about what we want to see happen in terms of self-reliance for refugees. So as civil society organizations, we want to check in on how we are contributing ourselves as a different organization to the goal of self-reliance, and also think about what recommendations we want to make to states at the high-level official meeting, which is going to happen in December. So that's why we're having this meeting today. So before I continue, I think I'll need to introduce like the team, the research team and the facilitation team that actually put all this work together. Just like what Foni said at the beginning, there are 3 organizations that actually contributed. Next slide, please. So there are 3 organizations that did the research and that are part of the research and the facilitation team. The first one is the Refugee Self-Reliant Initiative. The second one is the Refugee-Led Research Hub. And the third one is the Global Refugees Network. So I would like to take this opportunity to actually introduce 3 members that are going to actually tell us about the 3 organizations that are actually taking part of this organization, that did the research and are facilitating this work today. The first one is on the Refugee Self-Reliant Initiative. And I would like to introduce Kellie to introduce herself and also tell us about the Refugee Self-Reliant Initiative. Kellie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Simon, and it's great to be with all of you today. So my name is Kellie Leeson. I'm based in New York City with the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative. And the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative is a multi-stakeholder collaboration that promotes opportunities for refugees around the world to become self-reliant and achieve a better quality of life, while also simultaneously advocating for the full enjoyment of refugee rights. And over the last several years, we have convened partners around the globe to increase our understanding of self-reliance. And collectively, we are improving how we measure self-reliance, learning lessons about what works and what we still have to learn. And very importantly, we are advocating for refugees to be able to exercise their rights to achieve self-reliance. The high-level meeting in December is a great opportunity to reflect on our collective progress toward the goal of enhancing refugee self-reliance. And who better to lead the discussion than refugee youth and refugee researchers who are organizing, building power, and learning. Our 3 organizations have been motivated by the opportunity to bring together diverse voices to the self-reliance conversation, to hold ourselves accountable, and also recommend a path forward for the critical GCR objective of self-reliance. Because as Simon noted, if that is achieved, it could be life-changing for millions of refugees around the world. So I'm pleased to be working with all of you to be thinking about our path forward for self-reliance and our recommendations for the high-level meeting, and want to make sure that our facilitation team gets recognized. So Simar and Fareesha, if you could turn on your camera so we can wave and let them know what contribution you've made, that would be great too. And then I'll hand back over to Simon.
Thank you, Fareesha and Simar, and thank you, Kellie, for the introduction. So I will also turn back to my co-moderator, Foni. Foni, can you speak to us about the Global Refugees Network? Foni, over to you.
Thank you very much, Simon. The Global Refugee Youth Network supports young refugees to develop their capacity to help each other, lead initiatives, and also to respond to their community, to the needs of their community, and advocate for changes they feel that are important. One of the Global Refugee Youth Network's objective is to develop refugee youth skills and really just ensure that refugee research is able to inform policy. And self-reliance has always and is still a crucial issue for young refugees and their communities. And when the Refugee Self-Reliance and Kellie and the team approached us to see if we'd be interested to collaborate on this particular piece of work, we were excited to join this, and how we continued to participate in this is that we involved other young people who are quite interested in research. And I'm taking this particular opportunity to ask all the different young people who we've been working with to turn on their videos and just wave, so they can also see the different young people who've been able to participate and share their perspective on research and self-reliance. Thank you, Simon. Over and back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Foni, for that elaboration. The last team is the Refugee-Led Research Hub, and I'm going to ask Bahati to actually tell us who is the Refugee-Led Research Hub and why are they involved in this project. Bahati, over to you.
Thank you so much, Simon. Greetings to all of you here. It's really an honor for us as an organization to be part of this project. My name is Bahati Ernestine. I am calling in from Nova Scotia, Canada, and I work for the Refugee-Led Research Hub. So the Refugee Research Hub is an initiative of the Refugee Studies Center at the University of Oxford, but we are physically based in Nairobi, housed by the British Institute of East Africa. Our work is in the area of refugees and forced migration, and basically we use academic tools such as research to generate evidence that can influence policy and practices in this field of displacement. We currently have 40 colleagues, 37 of whom are displaced or have a displacement background. And I mention this because it is very important to us that all these activities and this knowledge production is led by displaced scholars, which is something that we have seen lacking in the past. So part of the activities that we do, we have research projects and other things that we take part of. And one of the things that we have been involved in is this RSRI project, which we feel very strongly about because it is in line with our principles and our goals as an organization. The fact that it is a collaborative process and that it is building on the research skills of refugees themselves, and also because self-reliance is one of the things that we feel very strongly about. It's a topic of interest for us as an organization. With those brief remarks, I would like to acknowledge my colleagues from the RLRH who have taken part in this program. If they're able to turn the videos on and just wave. Then back to you, Simon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bahati. Thank you so much, Kellie, for the introduction and for telling us the organization that actually taking part and leading this process. So we're now going to do like a small breakout session where we'll be discussing and working in groups. So in the group, we're going to be taking 5 minutes each in the group. So it's just a small icebreaker that you're going to actually use to introduce yourself, also get to know the people that are participating in this event today. So the first thing is you name one thing that your organization, because I believe we're all representing different part of organizations, different organizations right now. So name one thing that your organization does to support refugee self-reliance. Then the second one is when you come back, after naming that, when you come back, you will come and put here in the chat, what is it that you have learned from the group discussion? And then we'll take it from there. So Laura, please, will you take us to the breakout rooms? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simon. So everyone is going to receive an invitation to the different groups. Please accept it. We will share the information in the chat. Please you can check in the chat what you have to do, and please accept your invitation for the different groups. So I'll see you all in 5 minutes.
Great. I think we should have everyone back from the discussion.
Yes, everyone is back.
Great. I hope you've learned quite a lot of things. I have learned a lot of things, and I'm inviting all of us to share in the chat what did you learn from the group discussion. Please post it. Simon, as people are posting, maybe can you also reflect on what did you learn from the group you're part of?
Well, I think one thing that I've learned from the group I was part of is that self-reliant can actually be obtained in so many ways. One of my group members actually does a lot of advocacy work, leadership training, and the second member also does kitchen farming, kitchen farming for women refugees in the settlement where they are based. So this is also to enhance their employability and then also their self-reliant potential. So those are the two things that I have to learn.
Great. I can see in the chat, Lindsay says that in ours we talked about an organization that assists refugees to learn and research, teaching them skills like critical thinking, optionality, and conducting training. Really good. Thank you so much for sharing and reflecting on that. Bahati says, I have appreciated the like-mindedness in the group that I was in as well. Many thanks for that. I think we have learned something about the different organizations, and we can keep on posting it in the chat. And as we continue with that, we're getting to also another exciting opportunity to really also kind of understand why are we actually here, and what is the purpose of this call today? So the purpose of the survey that we conducted was a survey that we conducted to hear from the civil society actors, to hear their views, and also what recommendations they had on refugee self-reliance. Joelle will be walking us through the initial findings of this particular survey. And I encourage everyone to post questions in the chat during the presentation. We will get to the questions at some point. Joelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I really take this opportunity to appreciate everyone for really turning in and turning up for this Zoom call and for this cause. So I am Joel Amani Mafigi. I am a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and I've been in Uganda for now 13 years as a refugee. So yeah, I'll be taking us through the initial results from the survey on self-resilience. So we had 145 civil society respondents participate in the online survey launched in October 2021 for a period of 3 weeks. And the majority of organizations that responded are based in Africa. Respondents came from different types of organizations, where 49% are NGOs, and 21% were CBOs, and 12% NGOs, and 1.5% networks, and 17% others. So we had a close attention to ensure that RLOs participate Green Network through Green Network in Africa. We did receive responses from a variety of settings, from urban camps and rural areas. We acknowledge that there might be some of the self-selection and selection bias. Most organizations interviewed are registered, 87% of them, which suggested that there are more formalized and better resources. The vast majority of respondents, 90%, clearly feel that self-reliance is a priority. Participants highlighted the importance, saying that many refugees are very enthusiastic, determined, and to improve their life conditions. They are ready to give back to the community. They also have the experience which can be utilized in the labor market. We believe in with a bit of support, we can achieve, that's one of the organizations that quoted that they believe that with a bit of support, they can achieve their full potential. Increase in confidence and become self-dependent, other than crucial to positive integration of aid budgets and decrease while refugees increasing in number. So refugees have skills which must be nurtured, and if afforded to comprehensive development, can build micro enterprises. Gender-based violence and child right violation would increase when people are idle in the camps. This is some information we got from INGOs in Zimbabwe. So of course, we had a number of limitations while we were carrying out the survey. And one of them is we got results that are indicative and do not represent all civil society organizations involved in self-reliance. And some participants did not answer all the questions. And also 21% of respondents noted location as international, which does not help with regional breakdown of the results. With regional breakdown. So we'll be doing the focus group discussions with social society organization in some key countries to better understand the results. This webinar also is an opportunity to gather inputs and recommendations for the high-level official meeting. I hope the process becomes inclusive. We are at an early stage of analyzing the data, but we'll be sharing some trends. Next slide, please. So we had also a question on the definition of self-reliance. UNHCR definition of self-reliance, which is self-reliance is a social and economic ability of individuals, a household or a community to meet essential needs, including potential protection, food, water, shelter, personal safety, health, education, in a sustainable manner with dignity. And this definition comes from UNHCR 2025-2026 Self-Reliance Handbook, and the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative use this definition as a basis of discussion with the community of practice and uses a very similar definition. The large majority of the respondents agree with UNHCR definition of self-resilience. There is no conclusive variation between the type of organization. Those who do not agree highlighted the importance of sustainability and dignity. Among those who disagreed, lack of leadership, the notion of leading the response or lacking, like one of the INGOs in Uganda. Also, lack of localization. From one of the organization or one of the respondents said, I think the definition is too general and assumes the refugee socio-economic context is the same across the globe. It would be better to localize the definition to reflect the differences in the environment in which refugees live. One of the RLO in Kenya responded. Next slide, please. So we also had the question on the accessibility or access to documentation. And when we asked the rate of policy issues impacting refugee resilience that they see as being the most important, 94% of respondents rated documentation as a high priority, as access to identification that confirms their legal rights to reside in a hosting country, such as refugee card, refugee permit, national ID. 88% rated social services as high priority, and 72% rated economic inclusion as high priority. This highlights the multi-dimensional needs of refugees to achieve self-reliance, but also the importance of documentation to unlock other rights. Despite access to documentation being a high priority, there are significant barriers to realize this right. About half of the respondents noted that refugees cannot obtain valid identification that confirms their legal rights to reside in a host country. This has implication for the rights related to basic protection and self-resilience. For example, at the global level, 57% of respondents say refugees cannot access documentation to access health and education services. 76% say that refugees cannot move freely without permits, and 87% say refugees cannot use the court system. Next slide, please. We also had a question on refugees' economic inclusion and obtaining of economic right and inclusion remains a main challenge globally, as evidenced in the graph that is presented. In particular, respondents overwhelmingly report that refugees cannot own land, 91%, and cannot access financial services. This is by a rate of 87%. Next slide, please. We also had a question on refugees' access to social and education services, and this is also a case for social rights. This bar graph shows refugees' access to key services that have an impact on the ability to be self-reliant. The perception amongst most respondents is that refugees cannot access key services like basic healthcare, mental health care, and secondary and tertiary education due to their status. Next steps of the analysis will focus on comparing per location and on looking at the gaps between policy and practice at different levels, and what it means to be self-reliant. Next slide, please. We also had a question on improvement in policy and the environment, and close to a half of the respondents say that the situation has improved since 2018. INGOs tend to be more optimistic than CBOs, where 28% of CBOs who responded say that the situation has worsened compared to 3% of INGOs. Those working with marginalized population appear to be more likely to say that the situation has gotten worse. And those who say that the situation has improved attribute it to more advocacy, more right, and the comprehensive refugee respondents framework as the useful framework. Those who say that the situation has worsened talk about unequal progress across countries, low implementation of commitments, and social economic challenge worsened but because of COVID outbreak, as we can see in the quote. We also asked how they think the situation would evolve. Half of the respondents said they believe the situation would improve. Again, INGOs are more optimistic. Only 9% though thought the situation would worsen. And 33% thought the situation would improve. Next slide, please. We had a question on barriers of organization that organizations face in supporting refugees to be self-reliant. When we asked the top 3 barriers organizations face in supporting self-reliant to sustainability, to sustainability, it's clear that from the table that civil society organizations face challenges related to funding and grants. The top 3 barriers are lack of access to funding, length of a grant, a short grant and a short cycle, inadequate knowledge about funding opportunities, and inadequate, and funding opportunities is a key challenge, especially for CBOs, including RLOs. 58% of CBOs reported lack of access to funding as top 3 barriers compared to 24% INGOs. 65% CBOs reported inadequate knowledge about funding opportunities in their top 3 compared to 15% INGOs. Length of a grant was reported a top barrier equally by CBOs and INGOs. Next slide, please. We also had the rank on critical programming intervention for refugee self-reliance. When asking to rate the most critical programming intervention for refugee self-reliance, those got the highest score among respondents, highlighting again the importance of documentation to unlock rights. Yeah. And the rank was from advocacy for right to work for all refugees and other migrants, assistance to process documentation and navigate official bureaucracy, assistance to access work permits if accessible, job placement, for instance, programs to help unemployed refugees find work through collaboration with the public and private sector. And the 5th one, provision of free or low cost and easy to access basic healthcare. Next slide, please. And we also had a engagement of the private sector. So large support of the engagement of the private sector, which is 90% of respondents. Less support from CBOs, which is 12% said no, and from Africa-based respondents, 8 said no. Still, the support is significant. And what type of engagement with which private sector and organization appears to be hopeful? The top 3 included providing of training for refugees, at least 45 respondents, or work with UNHCR to create refugee skill training, 41 respondents, and sponsor refugee work permits or hire refugees, 44 respondents, and provide grants to small businesses. We had 37 respondents. Next slide, please. In the survey, respondents identified some solutions, way forward, as you see in the slide, of which we had funding for RLOs involving refugees in decision-making, advocating for policy changes, in addition to private sector engagement in the previous slide. And we look forward to hearing recommendation from participants today and the focus group discussion participants. Thank you very much. I give back the mic to Foni Joyce.
Thank you very much, Joel, for taking us through the initial findings of the survey. I can see in the chat that there are a couple of comments. For example, Sarah has said, I would rather phrase it refugee strengthening capacity building, because majority already have capacity. It only requires it being strengthened further, because they do the work they do because they have the capacity already, but it only requires it to be strengthened. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for those comments. I see Elia has asked a question. How long did it take to come up with this assessment? I'm going to invite one person from the team. Kellie, would you want to respond to this?
Thank you. I think the question is about the development of the survey. In the survey, we started, I think, having some of these conversations in July, and then over the most of August, the team came together and worked on developing the questions in terms of pulling together from lived experiences, also research that we have done in the past, and also what we wanted to get out of this in terms of learning about self-reliance and having information that could then feed into the recommendations. And so it was an intense August, September in developing the survey, which then again, as Joel and Simon noted, the survey was out into the world for about 3 weeks. And so we're really pleased with all the participation we were able to receive through this. And again, we have focus group discussions that we will use to build out some of the issues that maybe there are gaps or we'd like some further information.
I see there's also another question that is asking, what is the one key takeaway message that surprised you in your findings? Kellie, would you also respond to that?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think one of the things, it's not surprising as much as I think we're all interested to see just how documentation really came out. Just over 90% of the top thing that participants said was important for self-reliance. So even though we often think about self-reliance and put it in a livelihoods bucket, the fact that the protection issue, the documentation issue really came out like as the top issue that was across the board, really highlights just how that undergirds that having documentation and being, having the legal opportunities, just how critical that is for people to actually achieve self-reliance. So it wasn't surprising as such, but it was just an interesting reminder of just how widespread that understanding is and how important that is for our work going forward.
Great, thank you, Kellie. I'll just take one last one, then move on to the next section. I'm seeing Kulihoshi is asking, I'm wondering how best can refugees in DRC Congo who only speak French be part of this conversation? Simon, would you answer this question?
Sure, yes. So we're going to be having a group that where we shall actually be formulating a recommendation that we shall share at the high-level official meeting and also on the roundtable scheduled for the 29th of this month. So in the groups, we are going to be based on the different language that every participant here actually speak. Those who speak Arabic are going to be in a group that are going to be using Arabic. Those who speak French will be in a group that are going to be where they're going to be using French to actually share their ideas, share their recommendation, and they will select one of the group members to actually come to the plenary here. And so in the future, also like in forum like this, we look forward to also like having an interpreter. Like today, we want to have provision for interpretation in Spanish. But in the future program or event, we also like want to have like someone in French that will also interpret and actually do the interpretation here at the internet. But for today's meeting, we're going to have a group discussion where people who are speaking French will be in one group, and those who are speaking Spanish in one group, those speaking English in one or two groups, those speaking Arabic also in a different group. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I'm now going to invite Kellie to share some comments. But before that, as you head into the next section, could you also respond to this question on documentation? Was the issue on access or the use, and how it helps refugee? If you could answer that and move on to the next section, that would really be appreciated. Thank you, Kellie.
Yeah, sure, Foni. In terms of the access and documentation, in case hopefully I understand the question, but from what we were seeing in the data, we did not dig into all the details, but just the lack of ability to have documentation. We saw that from the participants, if I'm remembering the data correctly, from the participants, 50% said they did not have access to, that refugees in their countries did not have access to documentation. And then seeing that coupled with the fact that participants felt that that was critical for self-reliance, I think it's that issue of you need access to the documentation so then you can access the different services that you need. We also heard about economic inclusion to be able to have any access to any of that academic inclusion. So all of that needs further exploration, and that ties into the next slide, which is some of the work we want to highlight from two members of the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative, the Center for Global Development and Asylum Access, who are doing some excellent research that really complements some of the conversations we're having here today, to be able to really look at the difference between policy, the de facto, what's really happening in practice, and then what is allowed by law, the de jure policies that are in place. So the Center for Global Development and Asylum Access are doing this great research. They've been undertaking this for the last couple of months, and we expect that they will be putting out reports, maps, scorecards in March this next year. So again, this will feed into our general understanding around self-reliance and the opportunities and the barriers for refugees to be able to achieve self-reliance. And so that ties into that question and how we saw in the results from participants, how that documentation piece was so important. And we're going to see that even further explored and better understood through this work of our great partners. So just want to highlight that before we move on to the next issue.
Thank you very much. I see we have quite a lot of questions, and I know we want them answered. Let's keep on typing them in the chat. We will try to respond to all of that as we continue with the session. And we're moving on to the next segment, which Simon will shortly tell you all about. Simon, over to you.
Thank you so much, Foni. Let's keep the questions coming. We'll respond to the questions as they come. So right now what we're going to be doing is we're going to have like group work to formulate recommendations that we feel that should actually be taken forward. Maybe some of the questions that we're actually bringing in can also be answered in forms of the recommendation that we're going to be discussing in the different groups. So we'll have small groups where we really want to hear your ideas on recommendations to states, UNHCR, and other actors that are going to be in the high-level official meeting in December. So this is an opportunity to make recommendations about how to strengthen self-reliance to a state that will be at the high-level official meeting. Maybe a question like, how can we maybe ensure that refugees actually get loan? How can stakeholders actually ensure that refugees get loan in some of the banks? Maybe it's a question that the states can actually answer. So do we want to put that in maybe one of the recommendations? We also put in, so we're going to be putting you guys in a group. All the participants will be put in groups based on languages. So we'll have time to discuss one or two questions in the different groups. So please focus on making recommendations. You don't need to actually formulate the recommendation perfectly, but just let us know what your idea is. What do you want people to actually know? What do you want the states to know? What do you want UNHCR to know? What do you want the people who are going to participate in the high-level official meeting to know? So the first group is going to be actually led by myself and Kellie. Kellie will have like a note taker, and a moderator in a different group. Group number 2 will be led by Fareesha and Simar. And then group number 3 will be also in English, and it will be for Foni and Joel. We shall have group number 4, which is going to be in French. For those who are speaking French, who cannot express themselves well in English or in Spanish, let us go to group number 4. And group number 5 is going to be in Spanish. Rahilda and Kate are going to be actually moderating. I'm not very sure whether we have someone who can speak Arabic here who want to be in a group that's only for Arabic speakers. So if not, we will have this 5 group, and I will ask Laura to actually put us in a different group, go and discuss, and then come back after the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. And okay, again, all of you are going to receive an invitation to the different groups. Please accept it when I'm going to open. As Simon mentioned, all of you have different moderators. Please collaborate with all of them. So please accept the invitation now.
Thank you very much, Laura. I hope we had a great discussion and around recommendation, and also sharing some of the good things that have worked. We'll now spend a few minutes just reflecting back on some of the things that stood out, some of the things that were high priority in terms of the discussion we had in the group. We'll have about 5 minutes to reflect on this, and I'd ask all the different facilitators / note takers who were part of the group to share one, maybe 2 or just one of the top recommendation that came across from the discussion you had. And we'd be keen to, as we're having the discussion, in case there's any recommendation that you feel is missing or wasn't highlighted, kindly also use the chat to share that. And with that, I'm going to start with group 1 to kindly share what were some of the top recommendation or priority that came up from your group.
Thank you. So I'll be taking for group 1. This is Simon. So our concern was on access to documentation, which is actually a key in the Refugee Self-Reliance survey. And then, so the question is, what will you like to recommend to the high-level official meeting in terms of improving refugee access, timely access to documentation? And what we are saying here is that we should channel funds to refugee-led organizations or network or groups who can then do an outreach and be like a bridge between the government, states, the government services, and then the refugees themselves. To help refugees to know how to access documentation, and also make sure that there is the refugee organization that do the work, the mobilization, the sensitization, making sure that even people get there in time are well, adequately actually supported and illuminated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon, for sharing that clearly on the role of the different people and ensuring that funding is available. Thank you so much, Group 1. I see there are also other recommendations. If there's any other thing that comes across after the recommendation, kindly include in the chat. We'll now move on to Group 2 to share the recommendation as well.
Great, thank you so much, Foni. We did take notes, but I think they aren't showing up on the screen over here, but I'll just quickly highlight some of the key points from our group. The first one, which I think is the main recommendation that came out of our discussions, is to advocate for multi-year funding and more flexible funding from donors. So we agreed that and we had a very rich discussion about the various barriers to funding for self-reliance, barriers that organizations experience at different levels, from startup costs to a variety of different factors. But we did sort of agree that in general, having donors really switch to longer-term funding, multi-year funding that is flexible for self-reliance programming is sort of a big recommendation. We also had another really interesting point that came out around making sure that there is some way to categorize needs of different refugees to make sure that funding is actually needs-based and going to those most in need. Our notes, I think, will be reflected on the slide shortly, but thank you.
Thank you very much. I will quickly share on group 3. So one of the things that stood out from group 3 was really on policy and also ensuring that the reality, people are in touch with the reality of what is actually happening on the ground. So in regards to that, there was talk on making sure that the access to the funding reflects or ensures that they do have quotas for refugee, which reflects the reality on the ground. There was also in terms of policies and trainings, ensuring that refugees capacity, that programs can have in capacity building trainings that would ensure that refugees are also able to really take up the opportunities and learn the different necessary skills, especially around financial management. And then there was also one thing on documentation. I think documentation is quite important, which I think overall group 3 focused on ensuring that the policies that match up with the reality and also addresses the broken bridges or gaps that exist. And I think we will also share some of the other things in the chat that came across during the discussion. That was from group 3. I'm going to move on to group 4 to even share with us what are some of the things that came across from your group.
Hi everyone, so I'll speak on behalf of group 4, which was in French. So we had participants from 2 main countries, which had very different situations regarding documentation. So that kind of led to different recommendations, but the main trend is the lack of information. So in Uganda, participants talked about the fact that even though they have documentation and a lot of people are not aware of the rights that come with that documentation. And that makes it difficult for them in some banks, for instance, especially outside of camps, to open bank accounts, especially if they're looking to have larger amounts of money, if they're leading like a bigger project or business. So the recommendation here was to do advocacy with institutions, authorities, and services, including bank services, for them to understand the rights that refugees have. And then in another context, it was a lot more difficult to get access to documents, and it led to a lot of issues and a lot to do. And therefore, the recommendation was to share more information about what works when applying for documentation with refugee communities, and ensuring that people are able to access their rights. Sorry, I've missed quite a bit. It was a very rich discussion, but hopefully participants in my group can add anything to the chat. Over to you, Foni.
Thank you very much for reflecting on that and really sharing some concrete recommendation. I'll now move on to group 5. Did we have group 5 to also share their recommendations?
Hi, well, we were talking on Spanish, and we were with an organization in Canada. And one of the biggest problems that we noted is that in this country, the refugees are a bit more limited but more in the financial terms. So this is why they don't have an official identification, or they are in the case of seeking refugee. So this is why some banks or organizations don't admit as workers or let the opportunity to find or to get a bank account. And for this reason, we remind that the biggest problem is the lack of knowledge and of the legality of this document that is given by the UNHCR, or the ignored in Spanish. And maybe the best option for the recommendation is to create alliances with large financial institutions and companies, so that you will give them an option to create basic account in this bank. So this don't refuse to give the opportunity to have a bank account to the refugees, including and using this documentation.
Great. Thank you so much for really sharing all those reflections. I don't think we had Arabic, but thanks so much. I think we've shared quite a lot on ensuring that we've highlighted that documentation is definitely one of the important aspects of protection, and there's need to ensure that it's received or it's accessed in a timely manner. We've talked about reevaluating programs to match with realities in the ground. We've talked about investing in capacity building for the different groups that are worked with. We've talked about ensuring that access to funding is not for a short cycle, but really a long cycle, but also really as access to funding is made available, it should also reflect the realities that the community is living on the ground. Thank you so much for all those great recommendations. I'm going to move on to the next steps, and I will ask Simon to briefly let us know what next after we've had this discussion. What are we going to do?
Thank you so much for the rich recommendation that you have shared. Keep the ideas coming. I can also see the chat is very busy. Keep the actual idea coming in. So on the next steps and how you can actually be involved is that the first thing out of the next step is that we're going to complete the survey data analysis. What we have just presented today is part of the analysis. We're going to complete it and then carry out focus group discussions that are going to start from the 8th of November, that's next week. And then based on the survey, the focus group discussion and the webinar input, we shall create an initial report and recommendation. So after the focus group discussion, the analysis of the survey, and also the webinar, the roundtable that we're going to be doing on the 29th, we're going to then come up with a report and then the recommendations. Then we shall share the findings and the recommendations at the roundtable on self-reliance 29th November and at the high-level official meeting, which is on the 14th and the 15th of December. So join the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative Community of Practice, or the Global Refugees Network, if you are interested in maybe messaging us or maybe like continuing to also give more recommendations, give us maybe a good practice on the issues that we actually raised or that came out from the discussions today, those that came out from the report. If there is a good practice, something that has worked somewhere, or something that you have observed, something that can actually be very important, please join us and join the Refugee Self-Reliance Initiative, join the Global Refugees Network, so that your idea, your information, and the message can actually be captured in the final report. So thank you so much from me. I'll hand it over to my colleague Foni, who will actually conclude our meeting today. Thank you so much.
Great. It's been a very long one, almost 2 hours. We've had a really great discussion. I know we would want to discuss more, but it doesn't stop here. You can see on the screen the different ways you can reach us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on email. We want to continue this conversation, and we encourage you to keep on sharing recommendations that you feel are really important. Thank you for sticking around for the extra 30 minutes and really working with us on this. We're happy to have had you here and had all the great work you're doing and the recommendation you have. This is something that we will continue. And to the organizing team, the Refugee Self-Reliance, the Refugee-Led Research Hub, and the Global Refugee Youth Network, once again, thank you so much. We look forward to sharing the final findings once it's ready with you all, so that we can take this forward and really hold people accountable. Once again, from me to you all, thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Good evening to everyone else, and we shall see you again once we're ready to share the rest with you again. Thank you, everyone.